Hey everyone, this is Lisa from Life in Layouts, and today I'm back for Kellybell Designs. I pulled out the Dino Bash bundle, as well as the sketch that's on page number 27 from this sketchbook. It is from the Creative Design Team, and I will link it below for you guys. I do print out all of the embellishments and paper with a regular format printer, and then use the Silhouette print and cut features to cut everything out. I do have tutorials on how to print the paper as well as the embellishments, and they are in a playlist that's linked below. I put my first set of print and cut features on the mat and send it over to the Silhouette, and then start to cut out my papers as well as my 3x4 card. I did drop this 3x4 card into Canva along with my paper and added my journaling. I love the fact that I am able to add my journaling directly to the cards that are in the collection and not have to worry about where I'm going to add my journaling later. I even added my date to one of the eggs at the top of that 3x4 card. The first set of print and cuts are ready. I do use the Silhouette software to plan out my layout so that I know exactly how big to make my pieces. I have made those mistakes before and made some really large embellishments, and sometimes I still make mistakes. I took a look at those little word phrases at the top, and they are so tiny. I actually pulled out another collection and was looking at the word phrases, and I measured those word phrases out. They are 1/4 of an inch. So I thought, all right, I will make mine 1/4 of an inch. However, their height is 1/4 of an inch, not their width. And when I put the measurements into the Silhouette software, I made all of those word phrases 1/4 of an inch big, which doesn't work out. And I do fix that here in a moment. I'm following the sketch pretty closely by cutting down the papers to 3x6. I really planned out how these papers were going to look because I did want the green to be a pretty predominant color. So I am actually going to use the green paper with the stars on it in 2 different places on my layout, but some of the stars are gold and some of them are red. And so the way that I cut it out, I have one that has a ton of gold with just one little strip of red. And then I have one that has more red with 2 strips of gold. And even though they're the same paper, it does give it a little bit of variety. I don't have a wide format printer, but I did want to have this yellow striped paper go across my layout. So I cut down the strips to 1/4 of an inch. They are 11 inches long, which is the regular standard size paper. And then I'm going to paper piece them together and cover up the seams with some embellishments, so you're not even going to know that they are not a full 12 inches. My second set of embellishments are ready from the Silhouette, and you can see how tiny those little squares are. I can't believe I actually went that small with them and didn't really pay attention. They did look really small compared to the other embellishments, but seeing it on the digital screen is just so hard to really understand. But I did go back into my Silhouette software, and you can see that at 1/4 of an inch tall instead of 1/4 of an inch wide does make a big difference. I also pulled out my inks, and I'm going to ink up all of the edges with this green distressed ink. I think it's Mode Lawn. I did decide to pull out just a scrap piece of white paper to help with the distressing on some of them. Some of the papers I wanted the distressing to go way into the paper, and then like this white one that has the stars on it, I just wanted to have a green edge, so I just kind of went down the side of the paper as opposed to blending in like I did with some of the others. For the yellow paper, I did pull out a yellow distress ink just because I felt like it would be better to have that on the edge as opposed to the green. Now that I got all of the paper distressed, I'm able to pull off these little tiny word phrases. I do add a white border around all of my embellishments, but when I was looking at other collections from different manufacturers, I noticed that there was not a white border on these, so I did not put a white border on those little word phrases. I'm going to add the strips of paper to the center of the layout. These papers are 6 inches tall, so I marked 3 inches on my layout and used my T-square ruler to make sure that all of them were straight. I get all of them down, and when I went to put the very last paper down on the left-hand side of the layout, it was a little short. And I'm okay with trimming down my layout, but I felt like that was a pretty big gap. So I did decide to pull up that paper and go ahead and add another piece down flat to the layout with it overhanging so that I was able to cut it down. So that last one is a little bit bigger than the 3 inches, but I don't even think that you can really tell. And I'm actually looking at the layout now and noticed that the dinosaur print is over on the far left, but my finished layout has it in the center. So at some point I must have flipped my layout and not realized it. But I think it's okay because the stars are now on the outside of this paper block. The sketch also calls for 3 circles on the layout. 1 over on the very far right-hand side, 1 on the top left, and then 1 on the far left-hand side. I did decide to use the same pattern paper. I just figured that I would use one that was a little bit further away. So over on the far right-hand side, I added the white paper that has the stars because it's over on the far left. I then realized that I needed to add the yellow striped paper to the top of my layout before I added the circle down so that I could see exactly how much of the circle I wanted showing. So I do end up paper piecing the yellow striped at the top. I knew that I was going to add some embellishments on the very far right-hand side of the layout because the sketch does call for it. And then on the left-hand side of the layout, I knew that I could make my circle expand a little bit further up so that I could cover up that seam as well. So for the circle on the far left-hand side, I did decide to add the dinosaur print. And then the circle that's going to end up in the middle is going to be the green paper with the stars. Like I said, I did want the green paper to be predominant in this layout. The sketch doesn't call for stitching, but you guys know that I love to add some details, especially with my digital collections. So I did pull out my Tim Holtz ruler to add some straight stitching. I then pulled out this template. It's from Fiskars, and I'll see if I can find it. I actually have the packaging for it. It's super old. I think I even picked it up at a secondhand store, but it is a circle paper piercing stencil. So basically it's a template to draw circles with. And it doesn't line up exactly with the circles that I ended up cutting out. I made it work for the 2 circles on the left, but because a predominant amount of the circle was showing on the far right, I couldn't add the stitching to that one. I pulled out my thread. I am going to be using a lot of green, but I also decided to pull out a yellow as well as a white to add to that very colorful paper. And then for the white paper with the stars on it, I decided to pull out this red color. There's not a lot of red in the collection, but I felt like it would give it a pop of color against all of that green. I did go off camera to do my stitching, and I slowed the video down here so that you can see all of that great detail. I love the way that the circles came out with the stitching around them. I decided not to put any stitching on the striped paper or the starburst paper. It does get covered up quite a bit. And now it's time to lay out my photos. These photos are some of my favorite photos of Chip and Dale. The sketch does call for a different configuration with the photos, but I made it work for me. Over on the far left-hand side, I have a 3x4 photo and then a 4x6 photo. I am going to add a flip flap to that photo, so 2 additional photos on that. For the right-hand side of the layout, it actually does call for a 4x4 photo, but I didn't want to cut that photo down anymore. I even pulled out my templates from Simple Stories that help you decide where to cut your pictures down so that I could see what it would look like as a 4x4, and I just didn't like it. So I left it. It's actually closer to like a 4x5. And then the last photo, which is actually my journaling card, is another 3x4 card. So I was able to get a total of 5 photos on this layout with the flip flap. Then I'm going to start to lay out my embellishments. This was really late at night that I was doing this, and I thought maybe I'll just lay out my embellishments before I go to bed. I had already planned them on the Silhouette software, so I am looking over to the right where I have the image pulled up so that I can see how I had it placed in the software. Now, of course, when you print things out, you add your photos down, it's going to be a little bit different. So I did have to play around with it quite a bit, as well as the fact that I knew that I was going to be adding these bottle caps, and they take up a different space than they do just with the 1-inch circle. So I pulled out the bottle caps in green, yellow, and white, and I'm going to add them to each one of the clusters. My title does come from the word art. I love the fact that Kelly puts these together for you. It makes it super easy to add your title. It usually does have a couple of embellishments. This one has one of the dinosaurs kind of peeking out through the O, but I just decided that I would build it up with some of the embellishments. I used a lot of the embellishments from the main kit, which is the element pieces. That's the stars, the bones, the dinosaur eggs, and that one arrow that says characters. I'm then going to pull in pieces from the word flare. Those are the ones that are the 1-inch circles, as well as the small words. And then, of course, my favorites are the snippets. And I was able to pull in things like hashtag Disney Dinos, Dinoland USA, the word smile, as well as party like a dinosaur. I think that the benefit of using digital collections is you do have the ability to print out as many as you need. I did decide to print out a ton of the eggs, and since there were only really 3 types of eggs, the red one, the blue one, and then the set of blue and orange, I decided that I would flip the eggs so that I could use them in multiple locations. This is especially predominant in the eggs that are together, the orange and blue one. Because they're flipped, the orange one is on one side and the blue one is on the other, and then in the other one it's switched around. So it does help with adding some additional embellishments and making sure that they fit into the clusters the way that you want them to. I was also able to print out the stars in multiple shapes so that I could use them in multiple parts of the layout and it have a different look. You can see in the left-hand side, I have a really large blue star, but over on the right-hand side, I have a much smaller blue star. The sketch does call for 2 small banners up in the upper right-hand corner. I did originally think that I was going to add both those banners, but I think I ended up adding just some eggs and bones up there with that one banner. I feel like it does lean better to my layout. I knew I wanted to use a ton of these little tiny words all over the layout, so I'm just adding a couple of them in. They have some great sayings like dance like crazy, dinosaur party, everybody dance, DJ dance party, dinosaurs are fun, a prehistorical party, and so much fun. So at this point, I think that I am good with the pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and get the photos down on the layout. I did add the photo on the right hand side down flat to the layout, and then I did put my journaling up on some foam adhesive. I knew I wanted to tuck in some of my embellishments over on the far right, so I felt like having the journaling card up on foam adhesive would give it a little bit of room to be tucked underneath it. And that's all I did for that night. The next day I came back in, and of course I'm going to have a different mindset the next day, but I did start to put some of these clusters together based on what I had done the night before, as well as what I had done in the Silhouette software. The first piece that I'm going to start with is in the upper right hand corner because I knew that I had to cover up that paper piecing that I had done with the yellow striped paper. I added that tag that says Walt Disney World as well as a bone, and I did put the bone up on foam adhesive, and then I added the eggs as well. Then I started to work on the cluster down on the bottom right hand side, and I will tell you that this cluster looks completely different than what it did when I first started out. I think I went too high with my first star because I was afraid of covering up some of the circle. I wanted a lot of that circle to show, and by doing that I just went too high on my embellishments. I do end up fixing that, and I put that in quotation marks, guys, for you, because there's really not any fixing. It's just the way that you like that it looks. But I do end up changing that up a little bit so that I can fill that in a little bit more. And then I start to work on the left-hand side of the layout. I started with my title cluster. I did decide to put the Chipmunk-o-saurus up on foam adhesive. I really wanted that to pop, and then have all of the embellishments behind it flat to the layout so that it really felt like the title was coming off of the page. I added some of the stars right behind the title, and I'm just kind of filling in as much as I can of any of the white space that I have created by adding my title piece down. In the yellow bottle cap, I added the 1-inch circle that says only at Disney's Animal Kingdom, and it has the Mickey head on it. Of course, adding some eggs and bones to that cluster as well. And then I realized that I probably should get my photos down on the left-hand side of the layout. I did decide to add the photo that's going to have the flip flap, so the 4x6 photo, that one is flat to the layout. And then the 3x4 photo, I also decided to put that one up on FunFoam to match the right-hand side of the layout. I felt like by having both of them up on FunFoam, it did give it some consistency between the two layouts. And then I started to create the embellishment cluster at the top right-hand side. I first started with that really large bone. I knew that I was going to use a ton of the bones in this collection, so I made some that are really small and made some that are really big so that I could use them behind other pieces and they would kind of stick out on both ends of the cluster that I was creating. I added the little phrase that says "party like a dinosaur," and then for that bottle cap, that one says "How Disney Does Dinos." I also added the "Dance Like Crazy" as well as "Smile," and then realized that I did not cover up the seam at the top. So I did add an orange star up there and created another small little cluster, but I connected it to the circle and the bones with that blue tag that says "Character Meet." And then this is where I kind of realized that there was too much space in the far right hand side. So I decided to add a bunch of those little tiny word phrases to cover up some of the spacing, as well as a bone and a little blue egg. I then added a little bone up at the top and pulled out my pops of color from scrapbook.com. I decided to add a little bit of the pops of color to the bottle caps. It gives it just a different look. It has like a clear sheen over it, and you'll be able to see that in the close-ups. I then pulled out my color boxes in yellow, blue, and green and added some enamel dots to each one of the clusters. I also decided to add just some little dots around the layout using my pops of color. And then that is it for this video. Here is my final layout as well as some close-ups. Like I said, I did do my journaling on that card, and it says, "While exploring Dino Land, I spotted an empty path. At the end, the greatest discovery of all time. Chip and Dale dressed as dinosaurs. Full-on Chipmunk-o-saurus. The best part? Not a single person in line. I got to hang out way longer than usual with two prehistoric goofballs. It was easily one of the best character moments." Make sure you check out Kellybell Designs for this collection, as well as all other Disney collections that you can pick up and create digitally or in a hybrid way. If you enjoyed this video, if you wouldn't mind giving me a thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already and you want to see more double page layout inspiration, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks everyone for watching, and I hope that you have a scrappy day.